Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Mike and I'm a family history researcher. I love genealogy and I'm here to help you find your own unique histories. I hope you're excited for today's video, and so without further ado, let's get right into it. So today's video is about setting up our first family interview to get information about our family history from those who are still here. As I mentioned in my first video, talking to our currently living relatives is the most important thing that we can do to start our genealogical journey. So getting started, first we need to pick out a relative that we want to talk to and we can talk to. Then we want to make sure we have time set aside that we can both be at this meeting, whether it's a face-to-face meeting or an online meeting or a phone call, video call, whichever way you guys decide to go about it. Once this meeting is set up, now we go on to thinking about what we want to ask this person. Ideally, before the interview, you would like to narrow down some of your questions so that you have enough questions to fill up the allotted time that you have, but not so many that you run out of time to ask. And so today I'm sharing with you my top 7 family history questions to include in your interview. Number 1, what is your full name, date of birth, and place of birth? This question might seem redundant depending on who the person you're interviewing is, but it is important because this is our starting point. Also, it reminds them that this interview is about them. This will also let you record information about your relative while they're still here, so it doesn't get lost once they're gone. So, to break it down, you want to write out their full name, first, middle, last, exactly how it's written on their important documents. Then you want their date of birth. How you do date of birth depends on where you're from. In America, we usually do month, day, year. I know in Europe and some other places they usually do day, month, year. So whichever way works best for you. And then for their hometown, you want it to be as specific as possible. City, state, country, postal code if you happen to know it. Just as much information as you can get, because areas change over time, as we discussed in the census video. And this helps you keep a record of that while they're still here and they can tell you. Number 2, what were your parents' names and how old were they when you were born? We ask this question this way because some people may not know the exact birth date of their parents, but if we can get an idea of how old they were when they were born, then we can work backwards and find a rough estimate of when they were so we know where to look in the record for that person. As far as recording a name, we want to record it exactly like we did for our ancestor themselves, or our relative themselves. First, middle, last, exactly how it would be written on official documents. Number 3, do you know the names of your grandparents on either or both sides? With this question, we attempt to get information going further back, about people who are most likely gone by our time. This time frame, grandparent, great-grandparent, great-great-grandparent, is the most optimal for starting to find records online. Like I said before in my other video, there's a 72-year block on census records, so that is going back to just before 1950. So anything before that, we'll be able to find a record for. So that just helps us get an online start. Number 4, what is your earliest memory? With this question, we begin to get an insight on your relative's earliest years. Likely there will be information about their parents or their grandparents or their aunts and uncles. There was something important about this information, even if your relative doesn't remember what it was. They remembered it for a reason. Number 5. Did your family share any activities together or any traditions? Things like boating on the river on the weekends or going to the park together every week or dancing around the table, banging pots and pans on New Year's to celebrate the beginning of the year. Things like this can get lost from generation to generation. In my own family, my parents and grandparents, they would go boating on the Ohio River every weekend. That didn't make it to my generation, for whatever reason. This gives us insight on the good times that the family had together. It could be as small as what day they had a family dinner together, or if they always had a family dinner together, or if they never had one. It gives us an insight of the things that they did as a family. Number 6, what stories do you have about your grandparents? The more we gather information on each generation, the better the picture becomes of their life story. You could find something incredibly interesting. For example, my great-grandfather, August, was in vaudeville, and I would never have known about it if I hadn't interviewed my relatives for this information. It also gives us an image of what our grandparents were like, or our great-grandparents were like. This helps us, again, picture their life and just build onto our family tree with more leaves to the story. And finally, number 7. What lessons did your parents pass on to you that you feel were the most valuable? It shows us information about how your relative was raised, what kind of household your ancestors kept, and what was deemed important by them as a family. We are all a collection of the lessons we have learned in our lives, the lessons that we are taught as we grow. Your ancestors raised your relative, and they passed their lessons on to them. The one that sticks out the most is going to be a beacon of what life was like for your relative growing up in that household. And so there we have it, my top 7 tips and questions to include in a family interview. These are going to be a tremendous help as you start to put together your family tree and start to build your research question. Now, I should stress that these are not the only questions that you can or should ask. Some of these questions may not apply to your family. And if that's the case, then throw them out. It's totally okay. Ask the questions that are going to be relevant to your family history. Just because I would ask these questions doesn't mean that you have to, or that you even should. These are just my recommendations to include in your list. And the most important part to remember about this interview is to record everything. Write down everything, every little detail that you can. Get as much information as possible within the time that you have with your relative. Because once they're gone, they're gone. And you can't get that back. And then be sure to thank your relative for taking the time to have this interview with you. They took time out of their day to discuss with you their life story, and I'm sure that they're probably happy about it. But it's still a good idea to thank them for their time. And that is all I have for today's video. I hope that you found this information helpful, and I hope it helps you begin your family history research. And if you are new here and you like what you saw today, please consider liking and subscribing. It would help me out so much, and I'd be very grateful. Thank you guys for coming by. Have a great week, and I hope to see you on Sunday when my next video comes out.